For years, Natalie Ruiz smiled through subtle insults and disguised control, the kind that comes dressed as charm. Her fiancé, Darren, always made sure she remembered who saved her from her ordinary life. At his birthday dinner, surrounded by friends and raised glasses, he said, "You're lucky I chose you." Everyone laughed, except Natalie. That night, while he slept, she opened the banking app and closed the chapter, because some decisions aren't loud. They're logged, confirmed, and final. Subscribe to the channel to see how Natalie turned one demeaning comment into a life-changing decision. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was preparation. And her story is far from over. Chapter 1, Chosen. The Los Angeles sunset painted the sky in hues of amber and gold, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors of the penthouse apartment overlooking Beverly Hills. Natalie Ruiz stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, her reflection ghosting against the panoramic view of the city she'd once dreamed of conquering. At 24, with honey-brown eyes and caramel skin that seemed to glow in the fading light, she was undeniably beautiful, the kind of beauty that opened doors in this town, but rarely the ones that led anywhere meaningful. She adjusted the strap of her designer dress, a gift from Darren, like everything else in this gilded cage, and checked her phone. The nanny had sent a photo of Jamie, her 5-year-old son, proudly displaying a drawing of what appeared to be a dinosaur wearing a crown. Natalie's chest tightened. She missed bedtime stories again. 3rd time this week. Ready? Darren Blackwood's voice, smooth and commanding, filled the room before he did. At 44, he carried himself with the effortless confidence of a man accustomed to being obeyed. His salt and pepper hair was expertly cut, his custom suit worth more than what Natalie used to make in 3 months back in Oak Ridge, the small Midwestern town she'd fled after high school. "Almost," she answered, slipping her phone into her clutch. "Is it just us and the Millers tonight?" Darren's reflection appeared behind hers in the window. He placed his hands on her shoulders, his wedding band-free fingers pressing into her skin just firmly enough to remind her of his strength. "I invited a few more people. It's my birthday, after all." His eyes met hers in the glass. "You look beautiful. A proper accessory for a man of my standing." The compliment slid between her ribs like a polished knife, something that would have offended her 3 years ago, before she'd learned to smile through his jokes. "Thank you," she said, the words tasting like ash. "I'm glad I meet the standard." His laugh was genuine, and somehow that made it worse. "Always so sensitive. I'm paying you a compliment, Natalie. Most women would be grateful." He kissed her cheek, his expensive cologne enveloping her. "You have to admit, your life improved considerably when I chose you. Remember that waitressing job? That tiny apartment you shared with those other girls? Jamie sleeping in a converted closet?" The memory of that cramped apartment with its faulty heating and the constant fear of not making rent stung sharply. She'd been 19, a single mother with Hollywood dreams rapidly fading, when Darren had walked into the upscale restaurant where she served overpriced steaks to men who looked through her. He'd been different, or so she'd thought. He'd looked at her, really looked at her, asked questions about her life, her dreams, her son. "I remember," she said quietly. "And now look at you." He gestured to their surroundings. Designer clothes, private schools for Jamie, auditions with directors who wouldn't have given you the time of day before, all because I saw something in you worth investing in. His phone buzzed, and he checked it, a slight smile playing on his business associates, the euphemism he used for the string of women Natalie pretended not to know about. "We should go," she said. "We don't want to be late to your own party." The restaurant was exclusive, the kind with no sign outside and a waiting list months long unless you were someone like Darren Blackwood, CEO of Pinnacle Media Group. Their table commanded the best view, the waitstaff hovering attentively. I recognized several faces from magazine covers and movie posters among the guests. This was Darren's favorite kind of display: his connections, his influence, his possession of a woman young enough to be his daughter, all carefully arranged to broadcast his success. "So, how's the acting career, Natalie?" asked Mark Miller, one of Darren's oldest friends and business partners. His smile seemed genuine, but his eyes held the same assessment she'd grown accustomed to, measuring her worth, calculating what Darren saw in her beyond the obvious. Before she could answer, Darren's hand settled on her thigh, under the table. "Natalie's between projects right now, focusing on being supportive while I navigate the Warner merger." She felt herself shrinking, becoming smaller with each word. The truth that she'd recently landed a small but significant role in an indie film, her first real break after years of trying, remained unspoken. Darren had been dismissive when she'd told him, calling it cute that she was still playing pretend. "Actually," she began, something in her refusing to be erased so completely, "I just finished filming." "Natalie's so modest," Darren interrupted, his fingers digging slightly into her thigh. "Always downplaying her achievements as my partner. She's been instrumental in organizing my foundation's charity gala next month. Isn't that right, sweetheart?" The conversation shifted, and Natalie retreated into the familiar role she played at these gatherings, smiling, nodding, speaking only when spoken to. She watched Darren hold court, charming everyone with his wit and stories. This was the man who had swept her off her feet, who had seemed so different from the boys back home or the struggling actors she'd met in LA. Mature, established, seemingly kind. The transformation had been gradual, subtle changes that were easy to dismiss until they weren't. As the evening progressed and the alcohol flowed, Darren's arm draped possessively around her shoulders as he raised his glass. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Success is nothing without people to share it with." His gaze swept the table before landing on Natalie. "And I especially want to thank my beautiful fiancé. You know, people often ask me why I chose someone so young." Laughter rippled around the table, and Natalie felt her cheeks burn. "But the truth is, I saw potential, raw material to work with." More laughter. "To Natalie, who should count herself lucky every day that I chose her." Glasses clinked. Natalie's smile remained fixed, even as something inside her finally, irrevocably broke. Later that night, while Darren slept soundly beside her, satisfied with his evening of adoration, Natalie sat in the glow of her phone screen in the ensuite bathroom. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the banking app. The joint account Darren had insisted she use, "so I can take care of you properly," showed a balance that had once seemed like unimaginable wealth to her. Now she saw it for what it was: another chain. Her finger hovered over the transfer button. She thought of Jamie, asleep in his room down the hall, surrounded by toys and comforts she'd never had as a child. She thought of the apartment she'd secretly rented last month, using the money she'd been quietly setting aside from her occasional modeling gigs that Darren deemed acceptable side work. She thought of the small but significant role she'd just completed filming, the director's words of praise, the possibility of something that was hers alone. Natalie took a deep breath and pressed the button. The funds moved to her private account, the one Darren knew nothing about. She logged out, deleted the app from her phone, and returned to the bedroom. In the darkness, she studied the outline of the man she'd once thought was her savior. Tomorrow would bring chaos, confrontation, perhaps even danger. But for tonight, as she lay awake planning her escape, Natalie Ruiz felt something she hadn't felt in years: the weight of her own choice. If you're moved by Natalie's story and want to see how she reclaims her power, make sure to subscribe to our channel right now. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell, because some stories aren't just about entertainment, they're about recognition, about seeing yourself in someone else's journey. Chapter 2 is coming soon, And trust me, you won't want to miss Natalie's next move. Subscribe now and join a community of viewers who understand that the most powerful stories are the ones that reflect our own truths. Chapter 2. Calculated. The morning light filtered through the blinds, casting linear shadows across the bedroom. Natalie had been awake for hours, watching the gentle rise and fall of Darren's chest, wondering how someone who appeared so peaceful in sleep could wield such casual cruelty when awake. She'd rehearsed this moment countless times in her mind, yet now that it had arrived, she felt strangely calm. Her phone vibrated softly with a text from Lena, her former roommate and the only person who knew about her plan. "All set for today. Jamie's stuff is already at my place. You can do this." Natalie slipped out of bed and into the master bathroom, studying her reflection. The woman who stared back at her seemed different somehow, her eyes clearer, her posture straighter. She showered and dressed methodically, selecting a simple white blouse and jeans, rather than the designer clothes that filled the walk-in closet. Those weren't really hers anyway. In the kitchen, she prepared coffee the way Darren insisted it be made. French press, water precisely 205 degrees, beans ground exactly 30 seconds before brewing. One last performance. The aroma drew him out eventually, his hair tousled from sleep, wearing the silk robe she'd given him last Christmas. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, nuzzling her neck in that proprietary way that once made her feel wanted, but now just made her skin crawl. "Morning, beautiful," he murmured. "I was thinking we could have brunch at Sacconi's, then maybe look at those vacation properties in Cabo I've been considering." Natalie gently extricated herself from his embrace, handing him his coffee. "Actually, I've made other plans for today." Darren paused mid-sip, his eyebrows lifting in surprise. "Oh, and what plans would those be?" "Jamie and I won't be here when you get home tonight." Her voice was steady, revealing none of the thundering heartbeat in her chest. For a moment, confusion clouded his features, then understanding dawned, followed swiftly by amusement. "Is this about last night, the toast?" He set down his cup, chuckling. "Natalie, sweetheart, you're being oversensitive again. It was a joke. Everyone was laughing." "That's the problem," she said quietly. "Everyone's always laughing, Darren. At me. At the silly little girl you rescued from obscurity." His expression hardened, the charming facade slipping. "Because that's exactly what I did. You seem to have forgotten where you came from, what your life was like before me." "I haven't forgotten anything, including the fact that I was a person before you. I had dreams, ambitions, a life, difficult as it was. I wasn't just raw material for you to shape." Darren's laugh was sharp now, devoid of warmth. "Dreams? You were a waitress with delusions of becoming an actress, like every other pretty girl in this city. The only difference is you had a kid in tow, which, let's be honest, made your already slim chances practically non-existent." He stepped closer, his voice softening to that persuasive tone he used in business negotiations. "I gave you a real life, Natalie. Security, connections, a future for your son. And this is how you repay me? With some dramatic exit because your feelings got hurt?" Natalie met his gaze steadily. "I transferred the money out of our joint account last night." The shift was immediate. His face flushed, a vein pulsing at his temple. "You did what?" "I moved it to my private account, the one you don't have access to." "That's my money," he snarled, all pretense of affection gone. "Everything in that account is mine. I earned it." "Actually, half of it is legally mine. We're engaged, Darren. California law considers it community property." She hadn't spent those late nights researching for nothing. "But don't worry, I didn't take it all. Just what I'm entitled to." He lunged for her phone on the counter, but she was faster, snatching it away. "You ungrateful little—" He caught himself, visibly struggling to regain control. "This is ridiculous. You can't possibly think you'll manage without me. What about Jamie? His school costs more per year than you'd make waiting tables." I finished filming that independent film last month, the one you called a waste of time. The directors recommended me for 2 more projects. I've been saving from my modeling jobs, and I've lined up 3 auditions for next week. Disbelief warred with fury on his face. So that's it? After everything I've done for you, you're just walking away? No, Darren. I'm not just walking away. I'm choosing myself. There's a difference. He scoffed, retreating to the calculated disdain he wielded so effectively. You'll be back. When reality hits and you remember what it's like to struggle, to be nobody, you'll come crawling back. His smile turned cruel, and I won't be here waiting. That's a risk I'm willing to take. Natalie set down her untouched coffee. Jamie's with Lena. I've already packed what matters. What about last month's audition? He asked suddenly, his tone shifting to something almost vulnerable. The one for that Netflix series. You said you didn't get it. Natalie paused at the doorway. I did get it. I start filming next week. I just didn't tell you because I knew you'd find a way to diminish it, to make it seem insignificant, like everything else that matters to me. Something flickered across his face, surprise, perhaps even a hint of respect, before hardening again into anger. This is about him, isn't it? That director. I've seen the way he looks at you. This is about me, Darren. It's always been about me, but you could never see that. She turned to leave, then stopped, unable to resist one final truth. And yes, Alex did offer me the role on my merit, not because of who I'm sleeping with. It's amazing how different that feels. He'll use you and discard you, he called after her, his voice rising. They all will. You think you're special? This town is filled with pretty girls like you, disposable, replaceable. Natalie didn't bother responding as she walked out of the penthouse, the door closing behind her with a soft, definitive click. In the elevator, she leaned against the wall, eyes closed, breathing deeply. Her phone buzzed with incoming texts from Darren, first angry, then cajoling, then threatening, but she didn't read them. At ground level, she stepped out into the bright California sunshine. The doorman, who had watched her come and go for 3 years, gave her a knowing nod as she passed. "Good luck, Miss Ruiz," he said quietly, and she wondered how much he had seen, how much he had heard on those nights when Darren's voice carried through the penthouse walls. "Thank you, Eduardo," she replied, genuinely touched. Her car, her own car, purchased with her first significant modeling paycheck, waited in the visitor's parking space where she'd moved it the night before. As she slid behind the wheel, she caught sight of her reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at her wasn't the same one who had entered Darren's world 3 years ago, naive, desperate, willing to trade pieces of herself for security. This woman had edges, boundaries, a newfound solidity that felt both foreign and deeply familiar. She started the engine and pulled out onto Wilshire Boulevard, merging into the steady flow of traffic. Ahead lay uncertainty, struggle, the very real possibility of failure, but also possibility, choice, a life reclaimed rather than bestowed. Her phone buzzed again as she stopped at a red light. Not Darren this time, but Alex, the director who had cast her in the role Darren had dismissed. "Just confirming our production meeting tomorrow. Also, that apartment I mentioned in Los Feliz just came available if you're still looking. Great neighborhood for kids." Natalie smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes for the first time in longer than she could remember. She waited for the light to turn green, then continued forward, leaving behind the gleaming towers of Beverly Hills for the vibrant, messy reality of a life that was, finally, completely her own. Chapter 3. Changed. 6 months passed like the turning of pages in a story Natalie was finally writing herself. The Los Feliz apartment she and Jamie now called home was modest by Beverly Hills standards, a 2-bedroom with walls she'd painted herself, furniture chosen for comfort rather than status, and a small balcony where potted herbs flourished in the California sunshine. It wasn't perfect. The kitchen was cramped, the building's laundry room perpetually busy, and sometimes the hot water ran out before she finished her shower. But it was theirs, earned rather than gifted, and the freedom that came with that distinction made even the inconveniences feel like privileges. The autumn afternoon light streamed through the windows as Natalie reviewed her lines for tomorrow's shoot. The Netflix series had been renewed for a second season. Her character expanded from recurring to regular, a testament to the talent Darren had so casually dismissed. On the coffee table lay an offer for a supporting role in a feature film, the kind of opportunity she'd once believed would only come through connections like his. "Mom, look!" Jamie burst into the living room, brandishing a drawing from his new school, his dark curls bouncing with each step. At almost 6, he was all energy and questions, more talkative and confident than he had been in the penthouse, where Darren's irritation at childish noise had taught him to move quietly, speak softly. "That's amazing, mijo," she said, genuinely impressed by the detailed spacecraft he'd created. "Is that for your science project?" Jamie nodded enthusiastically. "Miss Chen said it was the best in the class. Can we hang it on the fridge?" "Absolutely!" Natalie followed him to the kitchen, watching as he carefully positioned the drawing under a magnet shaped like Saturn, part of a solar system set Alex had given him after learning about Jamie's space obsession. The thought of Alex spread a smile to her face. Their relationship had evolved slowly, professionally at first, then as friends, and now something more, though they were taking it carefully, mindful of Jamie's attachment and her own healing process. Unlike Darren, Alex listened when she spoke, took genuine interest in her thoughts, and treated her career with the same respect he afforded his own. The difference was still sometimes startling. Her phone chimed with a text from Lena. "Don't forget dinner tonight. Carlos is making his famous paella, and the girls are dying to see Jamie." The reminder warmed her. In the aftermath of leaving Darren, her circle had shifted dramatically. Some friends, those connected to him through business or loyalty, had vanished instantly. Others, like Lena, had stepped forward, offering support, childcare, and the kind of genuine connection that Darren's world of strategic relationships had never provided. "Jamie, honey, remember we're going to Tia Lena's for dinner tonight," she called out as he disappeared into his room, likely to add more details to his spaceship collection. "Can I bring my new telescope?" came the excited reply. "Of course!" The telescope had been his birthday present, purchased with her first significant paycheck from the Netflix series, a deliberate choice to mark their new life with something that represented looking outward, beyond their current circumstances. As she returned to her script, her phone buzzed again. The name on the screen made her pause. Darren Blackwood. In the months since she'd left, his communications had followed a predictable pattern. Initial rage and threats, followed by attempts at manipulation, then deceptive warmth and promises to change. And finally, as she remained firm in her boundaries, reluctant acceptance masked as condescension. This message was different. "My mother is in town. She's asking about Jamie. Dinner at Mastro's tomorrow, just the 4 of us." Natalie set the phone down without responding, her mind traveling back to Eleanor Blackwood, a formidable woman who had always treated her with a detached politeness that barely masked her disapproval. During one memorable dinner, while Darren was taking a call, Eleanor had leaned across the table and said quietly, "He'll tire of you eventually, dear. They always do. Best to secure what you can while you have his attention." At the time, she had been shocked, then hurt. Now she recognized it as the only honest interaction they'd ever had. Her phone lit up again. "She's only here for 2 days. Whatever you think of me, Jamie should have a relationship with his grandmother." This gave her pause. Eleanor wasn't Jamie's grandmother, not biologically, not legally, not in any way that mattered. The presumption was so typically Darren, assuming ownership of relationships the same way he'd assumed ownership of her dreams, her time, her identity. "Who's texting, Mom?" Jamie asked, returning to the living room with a book about constellations. Just someone from work, she answered, setting the phone aside. Hey, how about we read a chapter before we go to Lena's? They settled onto the couch together, Jamie tucked against her side as she opened the book. As she read about distant stars and cosmic dust, her mind drifted to how much had changed. 6 months ago, she would have been preparing for one of Darren's business dinners, carefully selecting an outfit he would approve of, rehearsing topics of conversation he deemed appropriate, arranging for Jamie to be conveniently absent. The difference wasn't just in the external circumstances, the apartment versus the penthouse, the struggling actress versus the kept woman, but in something more fundamental. She had reclaimed her voice, her choices, her ability to determine what mattered. The Netflix role was satisfying not just because it advanced her career, but because she had earned it herself. The friendships she now cherished were genuine connections rather than strategic alliances. Even her relationship with Jamie had deepened as they navigated their new life together, partners in an adventure rather than accessories to someone else's narrative. Later that evening, as they walked to Lena's apartment just 3 blocks away, Jamie skipping ahead with his telescope case slung over his shoulder, Natalie found herself reflecting on that pivotal night 6 months ago. The birthday dinner, the casual cruelty of Darren's toast, the moment of clarity in the darkness of their bathroom as she'd transferred the funds that would finance her escape. Darren had been right about one thing. Leaving had been difficult. There had been moments of doubt, of fear, of wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. The legal threats had been stressful, the financial adjustment jarring, the logistics of rebuilding a life from scratch overwhelming at times. But not once, not even in her darkest moments, had she regretted her decision. Her phone buzzed again in her pocket. Without checking, she knew it would be Darren, impatient for her response about dinner with his mother. Tomorrow, she would craft a polite but firm reply, establishing boundaries while acknowledging the complexity of the relationships involved. But tonight belonged to the life she was building. Jamie's excited chatter about showing his telescope to Lena's daughters, the warmth of friends who valued her for herself, the simple pleasure of a meal shared without tension or performance. "Mom, hurry up," Jamie called from the corner, his face alight with anticipation. "Coming, mijo," I answered, quickening my pace. As they approached Lena's building, the sounds of laughter and music drifted from an open window. Natalie felt a surge of gratitude so intense it brought tears to her eyes. This messy, imperfect, authentic life is what she had chosen, what she continues to choose every day. At Lena's door, before knocking, she knelt to straighten Jamie's collar. "I love you, you know that," she said softly. He nodded, solemn for a moment before breaking into a wide smile. "I know, Mom. I love you too." The door swung open to reveal Lena, dark hair piled atop her head, apron splattered with sauce, arms already opening for an embrace. "There you are! Carlos was about to send out a search party. Come in, come in!" As they stepped inside, enveloped by warmth and welcome, Natalie's phone buzzed one final time. This time, she turned it off completely and slipped it into her bag, leaving Darren's demands and Eleanor's judgment outside the circle of light and love that now defined her world. Later that night, after Jamie was asleep, surrounded by the glowing stars they'd painted on his ceiling, Natalie sat at her small desk by the window. The city lights sparkled below, a constellation of human lives intersecting, separating, continuing. She opened her laptop to find an email from her agent, another audition, this one for a leading role in a drama about a woman rebuilding her life after leaving an abusive relationship. The irony made her smile as she typed her acceptance. 3 years ago, she'd believed Darren had rescued her, had given her access to a world she couldn't reach on her own. Now she understood that the only person who could truly save Natalie Ruiz was Natalie herself. She closed her laptop and moved to the window, gazing out at the city that had both broken and remade her. Somewhere out there, in one of those gleaming towers, Darren was likely sitting in his penthouse, still believing he had been the author of her story, still unable to understand that some women weren't looking to be chosen, but to do the choosing. Her reflection stared back at her from the window, stronger now, more defined, a woman who had learned that sometimes the bravest decisions aren't loud or dramatic, but quiet and resolute. A woman who had discovered that real power didn't come from being chosen by someone else, but from choosing herself, again and again, every day. If Natalie's journey has touched something in you, that quiet voice that whispers, "What if?" then this is your sign. Subscribe to our channel now to join a community of viewers who understand that the most powerful stories are the ones that mirror our own truths and possibilities. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell, because stories like Natalie's remind us that we all have the power to rewrite our own narratives. Your next chapter is waiting to be written, and we're here to inspire every word. Subscribe now, and let's continue this journey together.